Hi, this is Bill Current, the president and founder of the Current Consulting Group, the number one recognized brand name in drug testing consulting. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Currently Speaking, the podcast of the Current Consulting Group. Today, we're going to talk about what it costs not to test for marijuana, as many employers are grappling with the decision of whether or not to include marijuana in their drug test panel. There's so much being said these days about the legalization of marijuana and marijuana users' rights. For employers, it's a classic catch-22. They're damned if they do and damned if they don't. Drug test employees and applicants for marijuana, that is. But have you ever stopped to think about what it could cost a company if they don't test for marijuana? For instance, what does the average workers' compensation claim cost? What does the average workplace accident cost? What is the human cost when someone is seriously injured on the job? And heaven forbid, what impact does a death on the job cost, especially when it is determined afterwards that the accident could have been avoided? These are great questions, and the answers can be measured in dollars for sure, but also in the emotional, mental, and physical costs experienced by those directly and even indirectly affected by workplace accidents. Suffering an injury on the job that requires medical attention away from the scene of the accident or causes a permanent disability is a traumatic experience with both immediate and lingering side effects. And just an author's note here, there's a great article written by Matthew Hart and published by Occupational Health and Safety back in 2022 entitled High Human Costs of Workplace Injuries Could Deepen Labor Shortages in 2023. I highly recommend it. Go to their website and check it out. The legalization of marijuana correlates with three specific trends: more people using marijuana, fewer employers testing for marijuana, and more workers testing positive for marijuana following workplace accidents. Some employers, and perhaps their attorneys, are shying away from drug testing because either they erroneously think it's not legal or it exposes the employer to greater legal liability. Even some drug testing providers are advising their clients not to test for marijuana in states like California and Washington, which recently enacted new laws making it harder for employers to test for marijuana. However, neither state prohibits employers from drug testing, or more specifically, testing for marijuana. It all depends on how they test for marijuana. Can disgruntled marijuana users who fail a pre-employment test or are fired after testing positive for marijuana following an accident sue the employer? Of course. And what does a lawsuit cost when an employer is legally challenged for acting in good faith based on the result of a positive test for marijuana? Well, who knows, right? But the prospect of losing such a legal challenge scares employers and their attorneys. In a 2023 survey of employers conducted by the Current Consulting Group, 40% said they were concerned about lawsuits and legal liability if they test for marijuana. However, in that same survey, only 5% said they had ever faced such a legal challenge. But maybe the more prudent question to ask is what it would cost if an employer is sued for negligent hiring or respondeat superior, two doctrines of law that make it possible for employers to be held accountable for the actions of their employees when they are functioning within the scope of employment. What if a company conduct a pre-employment drug test of an applicant vying for a position driving a delivery van? And it turns out that a simple $30 drug test would have identified the individual as a regular marijuana user, someone who shouldn't be entrusted to represent a company behind the wheel of a vehicle or functioning in any safety-sensitive occupation. Now let's say that while high on marijuana smoke just before beginning his shift, he runs a red light, rams into a vehicle with a family of 5 aboard, and, well, you get the picture. That lawsuit is not only going to cost the employer a fortune financially, which could put some companies out of business, but the human costs can be beyond repair. Some drug testing providers and a growing list of labor attorneys do not want to be on record advising a company to test for marijuana in states where using marijuana is legal. And I'm not necessarily advocating that employers test for marijuana. What I am suggesting is that employers weigh the possible costs of not testing for marijuana and make an informed business decision, one that is right for more than just the drug users. By the way, according to data from the National Council on Compensation Insurance, the average cost for a workers' comp claim was $42,000 in 2019. According to the National Safety Council, the quote cost per medically consulted injury in 2021 was $42,000, while the cost per death was over $1.3 million. These figures include estimates of wage losses, medical expenses, administrative expenses, and employer costs, but exclude property damage costs except to motor vehicles, end quote. But what about the emotional and mental trauma caused by a workplace accident? Occupational Health and Safety stated the following on its website, quote, when a worker is injured, the personal costs can be astronomical. The indirect costs associated with an injury are estimated to be 4 to 10 times higher than the direct costs, end quote. The simple truth of the matter is it could be far more costly to not test for marijuana. It's never wrong to do what is right, but that's up to you to decide. And that concludes this episode of Currently Speaking. Thank you for joining us. Check out our website at currentconsultinggroup.com for more episodes of Currently Speaking. Thank you.